tradition, the last tune we play is the national anthem. This is the Belfast national anthem.
Have you ever heard of a guitarist from here called Henry McCulloch?
Yeah.
Henry, I knew Henry from way back in the showband days of the 60s. He used to play in a showband called Gene and the Gents. But Henry was a guitar player, and so we all knew each other. But later on in life, Henry played in a band called Heir Apparent.
Okay.
And they were managed by Chas Chandler, who managed Jimmy.
Yeah.
And so we all lived in London at the time, and Richie and myself would, every night's off, which was very rare to have a night off in case we played 7 nights a week, but we would go out round to Henry's. I didn't do any dope or any stuff like that, take a drink, but Henry would be spliffing up and whatever and making omelettes with stuff in it and whatever. But anyway, Henry would sit there and he'd say, you know, it's only mad guys from Ireland would do what we do. Like, we go on every night and open up for Jimi Hendrix, and you're going on every night and opening up for Cream. You know, and if you ask her an English band here, listen, could you open up for Cream on Friday night? Oh no. But us, me and Rory and Charlie or Henry, it's just another bloody gig. Henry played one of the greatest guitar solos ever in one of those Paul McCartney albums. If you watch Woodstock, the movie, and Joe Cocker comes out, that's Henry doing... He played in the Joe Cocker's band at that time. If Henry was German, they'd have a Henry McCulloch Day once a year in Hamburg or Berlin, and there'd be big concerts and boom, boom, boom. Here, no, Henry who?
Yeah, I know.
There doesn't seem to be that same appreciation for talent in that sense. 3 or 4 years ago, someone in Belfast City Council decided that they were going to give me some award for my contribution to promoting Irish music around the world in my lifetime. And the Lord Mayor that we had at the time was a little girl. To me, she seemed like she was about 12. She might have been Sinn Féin or SDLP or something. I don't know what she was, but she was a young girl. She was the Lord Mayoress. So they have a thing at the City Hall and the whole do and the whole bit. So afterwards we're chatting, and she was saying, oh yes, and you were doing this and that and da-dum. And I was saying, yeah, but we have a big history here. I said, well, they think people like Ruby Murray. And she was, Ruby Murray? Who's Ruby Murray? I said, Ruby Murray's from Belfast. She had 6 singles in the top 20 at the same time.
Right.
Not even the Beatles had 6 singles in the top 20 in the 1 week. And you've never heard of Ruby Murray. So she never heard of Ruby Murray or and no history. And that's awful.
How you got interested in blues or rock music. You were saying about the road to Damascus.
I got involved with music when I was maybe 11 years old or whatever, in East Belfast, where I was born and bred, and I had a great fortune to play with Templemore Silver Band, who were a concert band, European Championships, British Championships, all this stuff. And I was obviously in the junior section, and over a period of 3 years, whatever, they gave me the equivalent education, like a university degree in music. So by the time I was 14, 15, I could read and do all this stuff. But when you're that age, your social life is inhibited. Girls run away when they see you with a euphonium case, and guys beat you up all the time. And so some of my friends started playing skiffle music, and someone said they heard a skiffle group on the radio. It was probably Lonnie Donegan, and they had drums. And so they said to me, play the drums, and I don't have any drums. I've never seen, only drums I seen were the 12th of July. But someone told me there was a guy lived nearby, and he played in a dance band in Belfast, drummer. And I went round to his house, knocked his door, said, hey, you play the drums, I think I might like to play the drums.
Yeah.
Can I look at your drums? And he had a drum set in his front room, and he said, here, go in there and enjoy yourself. And he went away and made a cup of tea. And I went in, boom, boom, boom. Wow, I loved the sound, the feeling of it. And it was like a religious experience. A voice from the ceiling, John, this is why you are here. And I left that guy's house determined that I was going to spend my life as a professional musician. I was going to dump the euphonium, and I was going to play drums.
Okay.
And that's how it happened for me, and I never looked back.
And in terms of like the music scene from when you were starting, like you said to me before that like Belfast was very happening in the 60s compared to Dublin, like I mean, what was it like?
Yeah. In the late 50s, early 60s, show bands ruled the world. Ceilidh bands, every little town, village, city had bands all over Ireland. In the north it was slightly different, and especially in Belfast. So at that time you would have had all the ballrooms, especially in Belfast, of which there were many, all the ballrooms had house bands. So they were professionally employed musicians working under a musical director, and they would play all types of music, reading the charts and whatever. And then they might have a visiting show band. And then in the early 60s, beat groups arrived for the young ones.
Yeah.
And so on a typical night, you'd have the house band, a show band, and a beat group.
Yeah.
And then maybe somebody who was in the charts. So when I was at that age, and I was hanging around with young guys in Belfast, I would sneak out of school and go and listen to all the dance bands rehearsing in all the ballrooms. I would go to all the rehearsals, and the musicians accepted me
Yeah.
as soon as they found out that I had studied with Alfie Bell in Templemore silver band. It was like me producing a piece of paper saying, I've been to Berkeley, here's my degree.
Yeah.
So they accepted me, that I wasn't some sort of an idiot. But they would all say, what do you want to play the drums for? Why don't you play a proper instrument?
Yeah.
You know. But they accepted me. And my ambition at that age, my dream, was to be a dance band musician. They had lovely, nice clothes and beautiful instruments. They always had money in their pocket.
Yeah.
Hey, do you want a mineral, Junior? Go and get them a drink. And I thought, where do I sign? I played in various little school-type bands, and then I got a reputation as being the go-to guy. So if your drummer was sick or something happened, get him, he'll do it.
Yeah.
And you don't need to worry, he'll just sit down and play and it'll all work out. No phones in those days, we didn't even have a phone in the house.
Yeah.
So usually it would be the local music store, Crimbles.
Yeah.
So I joined the Misfits. They were from Ardoyne. 3 guys from the other side of the track.
Yeah.
My eyes go that way and their eyes go this way. So that was interesting, that relationship. And I spent a lot of time in Ardoyne.
Okay.
And in the early 60s, we went to Hamburg.
Yeah.
So it was still sort of Beatles era,
That was
with the top 10 club and all that. So you're sleeping in the bunks that Ringo or Pete Best and everybody slept in. So it was that era, it was all wonderful. And when you're that age, you've only got a small window of opportunity to be young and crazy.
Yeah.
I knew that when I was old, when I'm 20, I'd be able to go back and be a proper musician.
Right.
And get my suit and and join a nice dance band.
Yeah.
But now that I'm this age, I have to be crazy and do what I have to do. So the Misfits were really popular. But we played, in those days, there were 3 tribes. So one tribe, you would be the Rolling Stones, you love. Other tribe, the Beatles. So you love that music. And the other tribe were don't care, showband or go out for a dance or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was and the Misfits were firmly in the mohair suit.
Yeah.
Nice tunes and whatever. And at the same time, there was a very famous record shop in Belfast called Doogie Nights.
Okay.
And that's the go-to place for all musicians. Doogie had great selection of albums and second-hand stuff, and you could go in and listen to every type of music you'd think of. And I spent lots of time in Doogie's. And Doogie was really nice, and I'd be listening to all sorts of stuff. I liked trad jazz, New Orleans jazz and stuff like that. And there were lots of trad jazz bands in Belfast. Some of the surviving members were at the funeral I've just come from. But I would go and see these guys playing, and I liked that type of music, and I got to know the musicians, and one of them was a piano player called Jim Daly, and I became Jim took me under his wing, and Jim was a blues aficionado.
Yeah.
Jim's house was a cathedral to the blues. His record collection was second to none. Hundreds of 78s, albums, sheet music. But he didn't get a chance really to play much blues.
Yeah.
He would have played New Orleans jazz stuff, but a lot of it's bluesish. And I would go to Jim's house and he would play me stuff. So I would have heard Leadbelly and Howlin' Wolf and all the usual suspects. And I was really into it. I loved all of that. Well, also at the same time, we had them, who had just made an impact. A couple of records in the charts in England, and the band had broken up. Billy Harrison, the guitar player, had left and whatever. They asked us would we be interested in being the new them and backing Van Morrison. And we said, well, we don't have a keyboard player. Well, get one. So we rehearsed for a couple of nights with Van, and it was all right. It was okay. But then the word came from their lawyers, you can't do that because there'd be more XLM than would be with Van, and they could call themselves them. So you need have some people from them in the band. So they got Alan, the bass player, and he said he would stay in the band. So that was that, and so the Misfits, it was not going to happen. And Van had said to me, we're rehearsing in the Maritime, come round and play drums. They were looking for a guitar player and a keyboard player and whatever. So I went round and hung out with them, and then sort of said, well, you're going to play drums then. So that's how I joined them. That caused a sensation in Belfast amongst the bands. How can Ringo be joining the Rolling Stones? It's not going to happen. But Van knew that I was beyond that. I mean, music, I was wanting to be a musician, and I knew lots about the blues, which he did. His father had a fabulous record collection. And so that's how I joined them. But I couldn't have got the job in them if I hadn't have learnt about the blues from Jim Daly and all the way back. And Van also learnt lots from Jim Daly. Van also speaks very highly of Jim, as all the blues musicians in the north anyway do. And that's it. I joined them and moved to England. But I took the Misfits with me. And because our back plan was we were going to make it as the Misfits. So I stayed with them for, I don't know, maybe a year. I couldn't take any more. The band drinking and pills, and I mean, the way Van was treated by the management was atrocious. It was awful. Whatever talent the guy had, they beat it with a hammer. and you must do this and you must do that, and he was not allowed to do what he does.
Yeah.
So subsequently them very rarely ever played anything remotely like the blues.
Gotcha. Right.
And I just get fed up with it all, and I left about a week before they went to America.
Okay. A week before they went to America. Right?
Yeah, I couldn't take any more.
Yeah.
It didn't matter to me. I
Yeah.
didn't care. And the Misfits started playing, and then just went back to being a musician. But my next brush, excuse the pun brush, my next brush with the blues would have been later on, move on to about 1968.
Okay.
And I played with all sorts of bands in Ireland and cabaret scene in England, whatever. But in Belfast, I was still king of the depths,
Yeah.
right? And I was getting a bit bogged down with everything. And a musician's pub, what was it? Oh, anyway, it was a pub that musicians frequented, and I was in there, and Seamus came up, one of the barmen, and said, Junior, by the way, people call me Junior.
Okay.
When I was in them, Van called me Junior.
Okay.
Still called me Junior. And so if the phone rings and somebody says Junior, I know it has to be somebody who was around in the early 60s. After people phone up and say Wills, then I know it's people from the 80s and whatever. So Seamus said, Junior, somebody on the phone for you.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know what I was watching, but yeah. So I got a phone, and some guy, Derek Mahaffey from Oma, and they had a show band called Sounds Anonymous from Oma.
Okay.
Our drummer's going into hospital for 2 weeks. Can you dep for 2 weeks? And I said, Oma. I may as well have said Los Angeles. I mean, it was the other side of the moon. And I said, no, Mama, I've got gigs and stuff. And they said, well, look, whenever you're getting in those gigs, we'll pay you more, but you have to do the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, well, okay. When do you want me to start? Well, about Monday. I said, right. I'm away over the weekend. I was doing Dublin and Cork and Limerick or whatever. And I said, okay, I'll meet you at Crimble's music shop. We'll probably get back about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Driving back. And I met this guy, and he took me to Oma and introduced me to Sounds Anonymous. And I got to live on a farm, and I'd never seen a cow. I'd seen them on the movies.
Yeah.
You see cowboys and cows, but I'd eaten them, but I'd never seen one or touched one.
Yeah.
And they cows and whoa. And these guys were real nice, and they were musically it was quite good. I enjoyed it, and we instantly became friends.
Yeah.
The guitar player in the band was called Richie McCracken, and we hit it off as if in another life we were married to each other.
Okay.
You know, Charlie is his nickname, everybody calls him Charlie. But Richard, we hit it off right away, instant friends. And after the 2 weeks, of course, the inevitable happens.
Yeah.
Oh man, you gotta stay, please join the band. And I was thinking, yeah, well, join this band, the money's good, music's good, guys are good, get away from Belfast, pay off some of my debts, do a bit of practicing, get my act together, get my musicianship going again, get on the right track. but I had to tell the Misfits it's good night and goodbye.
Okay.
Because as well as playing with other bands, I'd always play with the Misfits.
Okay.
So I did all that, and they changed their name from Sounds Anonymous to Derek and the Sounds.
Okay.
And they were managed by the people who managed the Miami,
Okay.
the Hate Rock and whatever.
Yeah.
And that didn't go down well.
Hmm.
Before that, they were managed by a guy called Bobby Platt, who managed a couple of ballrooms up around Port Stewart.
Okay.
And he managed Gene and the Gents that Henry McCulloch was the guitar player with. And so we all knew each other. And the people who managed the Miami and who managed the band didn't like me because I came from a beat group,
Okay. So the snobbery.
revolutionary, you know.
Yeah.
And we had a sweet thing going with 2 estate cars.
Hmm.
So after the gig, the guys who wanted to go home get into one car with gear, and guys who wanted to look out for women would stay with the other vehicle, and it was all wonderful. But of course these people said, no, you have to get one of these ice cream vans that show bands had, a big van
Yeah.
with seats and heated wardrobes, and you have to get these suits. Now, I could get a lovely suit in Belfast for like £10,
Yeah.
beautiful Italian suit. They were making us go to Dublin and suit was like £40, and
Right.
I couldn't believe this. What do I need all this for?
Yeah.
So these people didn't like me. And not only that, they used to send up a list every week of tunes you had to play. And one time I picked up the phone and I said to them, "Wait, are you band old melody makers?" And looking, you know, oh, it was awful. So it wasn't happening.
Okay.
And eventually one day they said, "We're going to have a photo shoot in Belfast at the International Hotel Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. Great. I arrived, nobody about. And then I seen the 2 brothers, the managers coming in. I said, where's everybody? Where's the photographers? They'll be here soon now, Johnny. Don't you worry, and blah, blah, blah. And of course then the boys arrived sheepishly, and I realised, and into this room, and everybody sitting down, and then these guys started to say, well, we're going to have to let you go. And I said, well, let me go, that's good of you. And he said, look, and he had photographs, all show bands have photographs and you get them signed. And I used to refer to them as, well, people down south, if you went to a dance,
Yeah.
have you any likenesses of the band?
Likenesses.
So I used to call them likenesses, and he'd say, look at that photograph of the band, and there's the band. Who's that? I said, well, that's me. What are you doing there? What are you holding? I'm holding a guitar. So this photograph had me holding a guitar
Okay.
for the band picture. But you play the drums, you can't do that. It worked.
Yeah.
And it was on the back cover of that year's showband annual,
Okay.
which is big time in Ireland.
Yeah.
So this didn't go down well. Then produced another likeness. Look at the back of that. I looked at it. Richard Sharp, Derek Mahaffey, Richard McCracken, Roy Rogers. Who's Roy Rogers? I said, well, Roy Rogers, he's a famous cowboy. You know, a 4-legged friend. You signed that. And it's a joke. Anyway, they were going to sack me. And I said, don't save you the trouble, I'm out.
Okay.
And then Richie got up and says, if he goes, I go. And Richie's brother played saxophone in the band. And he got up, I'm going. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And the band were due to go on tour in Canada.
Right.
So I said, can we call a halt here for 5 minutes, guys? And I seen the boys and I said, guys, no problem here. I'll go and leave you to it.
Yeah.
And Richard and Willie were saying, well, we were going. I said, no, you can't do that. But Richard wouldn't hear tell of it. So we talked Willie into staying, the saxophone player.
Okay.
So me and Charlie, Richard, we split. And we were leaving the room, and the manager guy who managed the band, the Miami and Derek and the Sound, said to me, well, Johnny, I just have to say to you that there's no hard feelings, but you'll never amount to anything in this industry. And I said, well, dead on head, see you, split. So me and Charlie left, and we started a band with a couple of musicians in Belfast called Cheese.
Okay.
And the unfortunate thing was that we were playing music that we liked.
Yeah.
Some blues and some American stuff and whatever. So we couldn't get arrested. All the club owners and people, they all knew me, and they were saying, look, we'll book you, but can you not play something that the people know?
Okay.
And I said, well, when we play it, the people like it. No, you have to change. And we, no. So the guy who was running the Maritime, it changed its name to the Rado, but it was the same place. He had taken under his wing Rory and Norman and Eric. And we knew, everybody, Ireland's a small little country, so we all knew each other.
Yeah.
And many times in Derek and the Sounds, late at night, me and Richard would be sitting with a large Bushmills and whatever, thinking, what would you really like to do?
Yeah.
Could you imagine playing with that guy Rory? Oh man. Could you imagine playing with that guy Rory in the Marquee Club in London? Wouldn't that be something? And we used to dream about this. So we all knew each other and went to see Taste many times. And Eddie Kennedy, who was the manager, liked Cheese. And we did play in the Rado, in the Maritime. We had Hammond organ and Leslie units, and and he said, look, if I get you some gigs in England, will you do them? What? When did we go? So we bought a second-hand ambulance and kept the beds in it, and we drove to England and to London with our ambulance, and we were playing places like hip places, the Scottish and James, Blazes, Speakeasy, all the hip clubs, the Marquee, and we were accepted. Wow, Hammond organ and everything, and oh, it was all great. And a million miles from Belfast, and Cheese were doing really well. And a lot of the times we'd be playing gigs, we wouldn't be starting until midnight.
Okay.
So you're playing the Scottish and James, and pop stars would be coming in. You know, and you're up there with your Hammond organ and you're playing all this hip stuff. And so earlier on in the evening you were free.
Yeah.
So many times we'd go and see Rory, Norman and Eric. And me and Charlie were like, what? Wow, this is fantastic. And many times I saw them playing, especially in the Marquee Club, opening for people.
Right.
People like John Mayall and established people.
Yeah.
And the punters wouldn't let Rory and Norman and Eric off for the main band to come on.
That's dangerous.
It must have been awful.
Yeah.
And I even in Belfast, I can remember going to see Taste. Taste opened a couple of times for Cream in Belfast. And one time I went to see the band playing in Romano's ballroom. And there were other musicians there from Belfast, obviously. And during the course of the gig, some of the guitar players were making aspirations towards the fact that Rory couldn't play the wireless. He can't even tune up properly. He's this rubbish. And I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So fisticuffs started. I just could not believe that anybody could not see and hear what was in front of them.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were all good friends, and Cheese had a little house in Lisburn, and lots of musicians stayed there. Even when we weren't there, we'd give somebody the keys.
Right.
And English bands that would come over. The early Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green, all that, and other bands, Ainsley Dunbar's blues band, and lots of blues bands who played the Maritime would all hang out in our house in Lisburn. And so we all knew each other. Well, someone came along one time, I think it was Eddie Kennedy's son, Billy, and he said, look, boys are getting a record deal. They'd already recorded with Mervyn Solomon on the Major Minor label, Blister on the Moon and whatever. But he said they're going to be signed by Polydor. But Polydor aren't happy with the rhythm section.
Sure.
And would you and Richie fancy playing with Rory? And of course Richie said, well, wait a minute, slight problem here. I play the guitar. And I said, well, you can get the bass and play the bass.
Yeah.
So if someone says to you, would you like to play with Rory Gallagher? You'd have to say, well, give me a moment to think about it. Yes, yes, yes. So we said, yeah. So Charlie went the next morning and bought a Fender bass in Crimbles. And I think then we met up with Roy later on in the day. And the following day, if my memory serves me well, we went over to Scotland and played our first gig somewhere in Scotland in a YMCA hall. And then the rest is history.
I just might do survive.
So that's how that all came about. Later on, it became apparent that that was not the case, and that it was a management thing where it was divide and conquer. So eventually when Taste split, it was over money, or no, the fact that there was no money. And they were telling Rory one thing, and they tell me and Richie another thing. Like that Rory wants you to get a wage. But we're getting a wage, and so three of us are getting, that's all we get, we don't get anything. And we were told, no, your money's being invested for you, blah, blah, blah. So it was awful.
Really?
And some years later, I mean, it was not nice at the time, but you grow older and you mellow, and years later, I got to see Rory on various occasions, and they did a television program here, Rockin' the North or something it was called, and Richie doesn't do stuff he doesn't want to know about anything, just leaving to it. So they asked me would I contribute,
Yeah.
and I said, yeah, okay. And I did my interview, just like this.
Yeah.
And when the programme came out, and I watched it, Rory did his interview somewhere in London. And it was as if we're reading the same script.
Oh, yeah.
It should never have happened, you know.
Okay.
It was a great band, music was fabulous, you know, we loved ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. So it's so sad.
That is lovely, like, because everybody says, like, you were so influential, from Brian May to, you know, modern guitarists as well, like in Slash and all, have said, like, just how much they loved Taste, and everybody said, like, I mean, he was at his peak, his absolute peak.
Donald told me, and Jerry McAvoy,
Yeah.
I played with Rory for 30 seconds. Jerry McAvoy played with Rory
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Yeah.
But Donald told me that after Taste, Rory never played a Taste tune anytime, anywhere, ever. On occasions he might, during a show, play a riff or a line,
Tease you.
bum, bum, and punters would all, yeah, oh, but he never played tune. He never played any Taste music after that, which is very sad.
Yeah.
Now, in the 90s, when he was, his illness was coming on, he had spoken to Dole about the possibility, should we get in touch with John and Richie and we'll do something. At the same time, someone was organising a peace concert in Belfast,
Okay.
and it was to be somewhere down in the shipyard, in a dry dock or something like that. It never happened, but it was proposed that me and Richie and Roy would play at it. Oh man, it would have been something else, but wasn't to be.
You've played as Taste in Belfast though as well, like quite a few times.
Yeah.
Like the one thing that I can't get over even doing this documentary is you're interviewing people and their shoulders go back and go, yeah, they played Belfast, we saw them in Belfast, and they're so proud, like, you know, that, you know, you guys played Belfast and nobody else was playing Belfast, like, you know, and it really meant an awful lot to people.
Well, one time Rory was playing in Belfast. The big gig in Belfast was the Ulster Hall, and I was, in those days, at this period, I would have been working. There were lots of recording studios at that time.
Yeah.
Now everybody does it in their bedroom, but in those days it was studios. So I would have been working in studios from 10 in the morning to tea time, and then maybe do a tea time spot at a hotel, and then an evening gig or work with the Nordists. So I was working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Providing for my family.
Yeah.
And I was working at Ulster Television,
Okay.
session band, whatever. And the guitar player, I think it was maybe Ivan Gillian, said to me, Rory is talking later on today in the YMCA at the Guitar Society. And there was a Northern Ireland Guitar Society run by Joe Cohen.
Oh yeah.
You know Joe?
Yeah.
Everybody knows Joe. And I just grind, or whatever it was, if it was, I said, let's grind. So I had my black suit and Dickie Boom white shirt on because I'd just come from playing in a session house band on a TV show, and got round the YM, went upstairs, and somebody said, yeah, it's in there, and so you could hear people talking and whatever, and opened the door and walked in, And unbeknownst to me, it was the door at the back of the little stage, not the door the punters went in. So I walk in with my suit and dicky bow on, and Rory's talking away. How embarrassing can that be? But anyway, we were chatting and whatever, and he was saying, look, your man got to come tomorrow night,
Yeah.
Ulster Hall. And I said, yeah, I was working, but I said,
Yeah.
I'll cancel the gig.
Yeah.
And Ted was playing drums for Rory,
Okay.
Ted McKenna.
Okay.
And we went to Ulster Hall, which was embarrassing because Mickey Connolly, who worked for Jamaican, the promoter, took two poor punters out of the second row and put me mine in their seats. And of course everybody can see the house lights are up. Oh, look, it's him.
Yeah.
And we sat through about 3 tunes, and I couldn't take any more of this because all the punters were all, "Whoa," and so we got up and went backstage then,
Oh, yeah.
where we should have been in the first place. But after the gig, we went to the Europa Hotel.
Okay.
Me and Rory are sitting chatting, we're having a cup of tea or whatever, and Rory says, do you remember the last time we played the Ulster Hall? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, tell me who was there, what happened? And I said, well, you, me and Richie. I said, I think maybe Donald was there, because Donald used to, Richie taught him to drive,
Okay.
so we'd a Ford Transit,
Okay.
single wheelbase, tiny Ford Transit. So Roy says, right, so it's you, me, Richie, and maybe Donald, and our old Ford Transit. That's it? I said, yeah, that's it. And a tiny little drum kit, the AC-30, 1 bass cabinet. And those days, we used to have 2 crazy boxes, they were called Hurley boxes.
Okay.
A guy in Dublin, Dermot Hurley, used to make PA systems for the show bands.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think it was a 100-watt Philips slider amp
Right.
and a microphone,
Okay.
and then another microphone, a bullhead Shure, the big stuck up the arse of the AC-30,
Okay.
and that was it.
Was this?
That's all we ever used. That's what we used the Isle of Wight. 2 little amps, jazz drum kit, end of story. But anyway, that's all Case ever used, small equipment. So he says, right. So we had the AC-30, a cabinet, small drum kit, tiny little PA, no lighting, no road crew, no nothing. How many people were there? I said, well, it looked just like tonight. It was stuffed upstairs, downstairs, on stage in the choir stalls, stuffed. So the place is stuffed. We've got no crew, no lighting, a Ford Transit, and just us 3. And tonight, with an articulated lorry and catering and lighting, and where'd all the money go? He was making a point.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point, though.
I made a similar point at Ballyshannon one time. I know they have the opening night, and they were showing a movie of Rory and Jerry and the boys, Brenton, playing at a massive, one of the first television broadcasts in Europe, going over to the east.
Okay.
Russia. It was a massive, big event, and Rory was playing it, and they showed the movie.
Okay.
And afterwards at the chat, I said, everybody, you dug all that, you loved it. Yeah. I says, well, that what you watched is everything that Rory detested.
Right.
He detested the showbiz thing,
Yeah.
all the bells and whistles. And
Yeah.
he was much happier being the guitar player. That's why it was never Rory Gallagher and taste. He liked being anonymous. Now, he couldn't be anonymous,
No.
it's impossible.
Yeah.
But he liked the fact that it was just the band. I mean, in Taste, we never rehearsed. So a rehearsal would be, Roy might have a bit of an idea and we'd talk about it, or if we're in the dressing room before a gig, might do something, or I might try something on stage some night.
Yeah.
Just start playing something and we'd play along, and afterwards we'd say, yeah, that was happening, and then that would turn into something.
Yeah.
But we never had like rehearsals
Okay.
or a set list.
Oh, not even set list.
No, it'd be silly.
So.
You just go and play.
Okay.
Sometimes we'd be halfway through a tune and we'd just stop, just
Bored of it.
didn't feel right, and we'd do something else.
Right. Okay.
And that's what made Taste so appealing.
Yeah.
We played more akin to jazz
Yeah.
from an improvisational point of view, and it gave Roy the freedom to leave the planet. Now, you can't do that if you're on a big stage with a lighting rig and organs and other stuff and the promoters there making sure that everything's no, you have to do the show.
Yeah.
So it became the show after Taste, and Rory had to be the front man. It's the show, the Rory Gallagher show. We did a famous interview one time, and we'd been touring, and bands did not like touring with Taste.
Okay. Why?
Because if you had to go on after Rory, be prepared to suffer. And we didn't care. If somebody had said, would you go on first? We'd have said yeah, because it meant we could go off and see some other band.
Yeah.
We didn't give a monkeys.
Yeah.
And we've been touring with somebody like Jethro Tull and different bands, and somebody said, well, Roy, what do you think about, say, Jethro Tull and all that standing on one leg? And Roy said, no, I can't be having any of that, you know.
Yeah.
And me and Charlie, me and Roy, Richard, sitting looking at him like, what? He had no idea.
Right.
That's what when Roy come on stage,
Yeah.
he just gone. He's in the moment and he's just gone.
But for you, the adrenaline high must have been so high because you don't know. You know what I mean? Like when it goes right, it's like the best thing ever, probably, because you don't realize it's going to go where it
I
goes.
have to say this in all honesty. Playing in Taste with Roy, it always went right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it didn't matter what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, we never played the same thing the same twice.
Yeah.
Play same tunes,
Yeah.
but some night we might play it at a different tempo,
Yeah.
or we might play it in a slightly different style.
Yeah.
Instead of a straight 8 feel, we might give it a slight shuffle feel,
Yeah.
and then sometimes in the middle of tunes we'd break off and it would be in some you forget what tune were we playing. And that was Rory, that was what Rory was about. And we all had a great love of modern jazz at that time. People like Ornette Coleman, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and that we were listening to that, as well as blues music and folk music. I mean, we used to love bands like Pentangle, John Renburn, and guitar players like Rory loved all that. Traditional Irish stuff. Rory liked everything.
Did you ever meet somebody and you're like, oh wow, I finally got to meet him?
Yeah, but probably not in the way that you think.
Okay.
if someone says to you, you're going to go on the road for 2 months and you're going to be opening for Eric Clapton and whatever, well, okay, that's no problem. Eric Clapton, great musician, wonderful, but he's just a human being like the rest of us.
Absolutely.
So as a working musician, not, you know, I'm impressed by the musicianship, but nothing else.
Yeah.
I never, only ever asked for someone's autograph once in my life, which is what I'm going to tell you about. And Rory got me into Ornette Coleman, alto saxophone player. Now, Ornette was sort of Rory Gallagher of the alto saxophone in those days. In fact, when me and Richie and Rory were playing, I used to think it was Ornette and Billy Higgins, and it was Ornette's band. You know, oh, it's the same thing. But we were big fans, and in fact, in a way, I feel sort of instrumental in encouraging Roy to get the alto saxophone. And if he had kept it up, he would have been a great alto saxophone player. But he didn't keep it up. We did record a little bit, and on a couple of occasions he pulled it out on stage, and the audience would have been like, but we were playing at a massive big festival in Belgium, the Bilsen Jazz Festival, Jazz and Blues. So we're headlining the blues night, even though Taste didn't really play the blues. You know, we weren't a blues band like Fleetwood Mac or any of those blues bands. We played our version of the blues. And when we got to the hotel, I seen the posters, and headlining the jazz night on Sunday, Ornette Coleman. And we're going to have Friday, Saturday, Sunday in town, and we're only playing Saturday night. So got the hotel on the Friday, and there's Ornette and the band, and so we got to hang out with Ornette. And in those days, I used to carry 3 photographs in my stick bag. One was John Coltrane sitting behind Elvin Jones' drum kit. One was Tony Williams, my hero, and the other one was Ornette Coleman. And I had and so if you were playing somewhere and it was a horrible dingy dressing room and the hall had bad acoustics and you thought, oh, I'm going to play tonight, so you'd sit in the dressing room and you get yourself psyched up. I get my photographs out and I'd look at them and think, I'm going to go, I'm going to do this, and it'd psych you up. So I produced my Ornette photograph and Ornette signed it. I have it outside hanging up on the wall, and it says, "To John, maker of existence." He could not believe that 3 Irish guys were playing anything like blues music. He didn't really know where Ireland was. He thought Ireland was sort of somewhere up around Norway or Finland or something. He knew policemen came from Ireland. You know. But other than that, no. So 3 white boys from Ireland headlining a blues festival. What's this all about? He just could not believe it. And then he couldn't believe it that I knew all his music and could hum lines from his saxophone and solos and stuff. He just could not believe it. Then he couldn't believe the money that bands were getting paid as opposed to what he was getting paid as jazz musicians. It was a wonderful experience, and we stayed over obviously on the Sunday. And on the Sunday night concert, Ornette Coleman headlining, and he got the guys to bring up 3 seats and put them up beside, it was Ed Blackwell was playing drums with Ornette, 3 seats beside Ed for Rory, Charlie and me to sit on. But Rory was too embarrassed. Rory wouldn't go up, and Charlie didn't want. I was up with Ed, no problem, and that was a highlight for me.
Okay.
That was oh man.
To ask you a general question, because you kind of brought it up there, is there such a thing as Irish blues music, or is there not? You know,
In fact, the blues is a titles in music are really a bad thing to me. Music's music. And when I was starting out, the older guys used to say to me, there's no such thing as bad music.
yeah.
Maybe it's the people playing it. You know what I mean? So I know lots of black musicians at the time who were scornful of the blues. Jazz musicians said it was demeaning.
Yeah.
Now, Ornette played in his earlier life. Ornette played in those minstrel bands in marquees,
Right.
and they still made him black up.
Really?
Put stuff on what?
Yeah.
But anyway, no, so the blues, we all, when you hear someone playing the blues, you know right away, that's the blues. But then you can hear other music and think, that's sort of like the, I mean, if I'm up in Donegal tonight,
Yeah.
and I go for a pint somewhere,
Yeah.
and some guy sitting at a table and he starts, I know, and singing away, it's almost like the blues. And there is a dimension of Irish singing in the blues, you can hear it.
See,
And they would have had the same instrumentation. Black people in America at the turn of the century were not allowed to play musical instruments. It was against the law. But in New Orleans, they were allowed to meet in that park in the centre of New Orleans on a Sunday, and they played drums and sing and do stuff, and the whole birth of the music became. So the influences, banjo for instance, didn't come from Africa. Didn't have banjos naturally in Africa, or even guitars. So, and fiddles, those are the instruments that they were introduced to. Within the military, they were introduced to a drum, a trumpet or a cornet or whatever, and that's where it all came from. So there's a blend of lots of things, but what makes the blues distinctive is, to me, is not the playing of it, it's the person performing it.
okay.
So if I watch some old footage of Harlem Wolf or somebody like that, and musically it may not just be in tune but it's
matter.
the feeling.
Yeah.
And if we go down into Belfast tonight and go to some pub and some band's on and somebody goes, well, I woke up this morning and my feet were on my legs. We know they sing in the blues, but it's totally different when Muddy Waters says, I woke up this morning and my baby done up and left me. You know it's the blues. So it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And what happened at the 60s blues boom was that a lot of musicians discovered the art form, and one team tried to replicate it. So strict blues, and those are the bands in Britain who looked down on taste and said, that's not the blues, you have to play it just like the record. And that was the same with trad jazz. There were trad jazz musicians who, if you did not play it the way it was played in New Orleans, then you weren't playing
Yeah.
trad jazz, and that's unfortunate. So it's taking all those elements of the feeling of it and do it your way.
Yeah.
And the uniqueness of Rory was that he did it his way. Later on, a lot of his music was a lot more rock and roll-y orientated, like almost status quo-ish, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, but that was a element of maybe record company and promoters, and you're playing a big stage and lighting rigs, you have to put on a show.
Yeah.
You couldn't go off and play 20-minute solos and you do all the stuff a Taste used to do.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me a beautiful clip of us playing at the Olympia in Paris,
Oh.
and I forget what the tune was, but in the middle of it Rory just goes off into the stratosphere and we end up playing all this stuff, and watching, I think back and think, wow, that is exactly what I loved about playing with Rory.
You told me a little bit about Stud and then how you went from Stud to Brush.
When Taste broke up, I did some session work and whatever, and Charlie and myself started Stud with an old friend, Jimmy Cregan. Jimmy played with Family,
Yeah.
who were a well-known band from London, and we didn't want to get tagged with this ex-Taste thing.
Yeah.
And so the music that Stud played was a bit more sort of heading towards that prog rock at the time. Hey, look at us, we're really into our music, and get a bit involved. And then we brought in Will Weeder from Family,
Okay.
playing violin and keyboards and stuff. And then the band took a change, and we would do shows in Europe where we would open up with Jim Cregan and the string quartet.
Oh.
And then we'd add in Will might come on and play a bit of flute and keyboard, and then Charlie a bit of bass. Then I'd start playing the drums, and then the strings would leave and we'd move on and do a complete show.
Yeah.
So you either liked it or you didn't like it, but it was expensive, so we were told you can't do that anymore. Get back to playing. So Stud was alright, but Charlie was getting poached by people, so Charlie went off to play with he went away to play with Spencer Davis and different people, and Jimmy Cregan was friends with Steve Harley, and then that Cockney Rebel thing came about. So it ended up, it was me and the band, and that was it, and all different musicians. And being a band leader, it's the only time ever in my life I was a band leader, and it's not nice. It's the pits, because you're lying in bed worrying about petrol and wheels and when you should be thinking about the music. But anyway, we had gigs to do and I honoured them. And there was a guy who used to come to gigs, and he said, I play the guitar, and his best friend was Peter Green. Peter was going through the living on a park bench period, fingernails,
Oh yeah.
And so he said, I would like to do it for real, but I'm not ready yet. Can I be your roadie? Now, I never had a drum tech, ever. And Donald Gallagher and myself used to have words because I used to go out in front of the audience and set my drums up.
Okay.
So the other bands have gone off and we're top of the bill. Okay. So I come out and put my drums up.
Right.
And the punkers didn't mind because that's what we always did.
Yeah.
Didn't matter, cares.
Yeah.
You know. But I never had a drum tech. So I said, okay, you can be my drum tech.
Yeah.
And he can play the guitar. So he lived with me in Marion for a while in London. And I taught him to play a few drum licks.
Okay.
So if you're off playing somewhere, if you're playing in Europe,
yeah,
and you get your gear in, do a sound check, the local bands come down to check you out.
Mm.
And the bands that are going to be on before you come down there and check you out. And the guy comes, the roadie's on there, and he's putting the drums up. And he gets over and he picks up a guitar, plugs it in. And he sort of plugs the bass in. Over behind the drums. And they think, suffering Mother Teresa, if the roadie's like that, what's the band going to be like? So that guy was Snowy White, the guitar player, and Snowy was the roadie. So eventually when Jimmy left, Snowy took over the guitar playing. Of course, Snowy was fortunate to go on to bigger and better things. Yeah. And so we were playing one night at an all-nighter in London, and we were depping for another band, Soft Machine I think it was. Nice. And we took over the gig, and it was Hippies, London, 1971-72. Okay. All-nighters, couldn't see anything for smoke, old cinema stuff, 10 bands on, you know, and in the dressing room, and the door opened and the Brush came in. Hey Johnny, how are you? And how are you doing here? He says, oh, I'm playing tonight. Oh great, who's in your band? Oh, you are. What? So he didn't have a band, he had a young kid, young guy, Adrian, and he said to me, you're playing drums. So he talked me into it and I said, all right. And then he talked me into letting him go on last, okay, when we were supposed to be topping. So Stud went on and we did our stuff. And the Hippies were all, yeah man, yeah. And I said to Brush, what are we going to do? He says, oh, we'll wing it. You go out and set up a nice little pocket, nice groove about sort of something about that, and then we'll join in and something will happen. So I says, okay. So I went out behind the kit, started to play, and I looked round and some guys were putting beer crates up and put some wood behind me. What in the playing away? And then Adrian plugged in, I could hear the guitar, and then I could hear the audience going, yeah. And the next thing, the Brush leaps over the top of the drums, right in front of the drum kit, boom, good morning, little school. And we did, just kept playing all night, wrecked the place. And I thought, oh, good God, I'm working my nab off trying to run a band. I can go on with him, don't have to rehearse, don't have to do anything. So I joined Brush and we went out as a trio called Brush, okay, with Adrian. Right. And then after that, he got finance from Dublin to reform Skid Row. And I left London and moved to Dublin, right, and to join the Skid Row.
City girls all know that fans all know that they're all ready and they like the show.
We did the stadium and the usual, but the band should have went straight to America, but no, they hung about and there was money there, the guy who was backing them, and Brush was getting his hair implants done, his teeth done, and all this stuff, and the boys were loving the notoriety of roaming about.
Yeah.
You know, hey.
Played every village.
And the troubles were really bad up here, and I just thought, well, no, I've had enough, and I left the Brush.
Right.
But they were some of the happiest days of my life playing with Brush.
Because having interviewed him yesterday, him and his wife both speak so fondly of you, and really, really thought the world of you. Actually, they were talking about when you're out in the back garden with them, and they're having a crack with you. They really, really thought a lot of you, and
well, Brush and Mar are two beautiful people.
Yeah.
And Brush is one of those extremely gifted, talented, if you're religious, maybe he's God blessed or whatever, but it was not meant to be. He helped so many other people to be. But it doesn't matter to Brush. His ego is a different type of ego. He'll make those things saying, I challenge Skid Row in America to gig anywhere, anytime, any place, and I'll blow you to bits, He's
doing it, yes.
When he was recently playing in Whelan's, which I couldn't get to, I think it was Jude's band were on first, and I messaged Jude to say, be prepared, he'll blow anybody off, anywhere, anytime. Brush, sensational. As a bass player, he played the bass like a guitar player.
Yeah.
And the way I told you that some guitar players used to knock Rory, bass players would say, Brush is rubbish, he can't play the bass, because he's playing like Jaco Pastorius, he's playing all, that first Skid Row album, when Lolly on the drums, whoa! Brush was sensational. And then later on in life he decided to play the guitar.
I think...
No, you're a good guitar player. I can play the guitar better than that. You should go back to playing the bass. But anyway, I love Brush dearly. I've been blessed. Some people at the funeral this morning were saying to me, John, one thing about your career, because I'm out of it now, I don't think about music. You don't see any music stuff or photograph anywhere in the house. I had to. I was in a bad place, but I'm over it. But some of the guys this morning were saying, you were so lucky in your career. You only ever got to play with good people. I said, no, I was always lucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Wilson.
G-I-N. G-L-O-R-I-A. 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 G-L-O-R-I-A.